The reason why I will never work the night shift again. I live in a small town where everyone knows everyone, so names have been changed for privacy reasons. I started as a night auditor at a local hotel in town about 2 months ago. The pay wasn't great, but it was very laid back, which was perfect for me because I just needed something while I'm getting my bachelor's degree. I came in at 11 p.m. and worked until 7 a.m. Didn't have to do much except file some paperwork and send some emails. I'm going to try to explain how the hotel was set up so you can get a layout of how the building was. The lobby was not connected to the guests' rooms, and it was its own building connected to a large dining room where breakfast was served each morning to the guests at the hotel, and on the opposite side of the building was the bar. It was your stereotypical small-town hotel bar. The lobby and bar were only separated by a thin wall and hallway where the bathrooms were, and the same went for the dining room. The back hallway where we kept extra supplies connected all 3 rooms, and it also connected to guts of the kitchen attached to the dining room. This day had been like any other. I woke up, went to my friend Simon's house, we hung out and watched a movie, and then he dropped me off at work. I have a car, but it's at the shop right now, getting worked on. As we pulled up, I noticed a young guy in his 20s standing near the entrance of the hotel. I thought he looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. I arrived at work at 11:02 tonight. Tasha, the girl I was taking over for, already had her stuff packed and was ready to clock out. She quickly gave me the rundown about how her day had been, told me a man had told her to let me know not to lock the front door tonight because he worked 3rd shift and would be coming in for coffee, which I thought was weird because I'm either at the front desk all night or in the back office watching the cameras. Then Tasha told me to have a good night and she left. As Tasha pulled off, I noticed the guy that had been standing outside was still there. I thought maybe he had been at the bar or something, so I didn't think anything of it. I went ahead and started doing some of the paperwork in the back office, so I would have some downtime later. Then, I heard the front door open. I looked up to the camera and saw the guy standing by the door, which I had locked, and I walked over and opened it. He smiled, and then asked if he could use my phone to call someone to pick him up. I handed him the hotel's cordless because mine was still in my bag. He stood there, holding the phone in his hand, just looking at me. Then, as if he'd realized he was being weird, he looked down and started dialing a number. After a second, he hung up and tried to do a second number. Then he turned back to me. He looked down to my name tag and read, "Shelby," out loud. Then he said, "Shelby," my last name, from my high school. I just looked at him, confused. It's Tyler, last name, from high school. I don't know if you remember me or not. I did, but he was an asshole then, so I chose to play dumb. It's not ringing any bells. He smiled really big. Well, that was a lifetime ago. He handed me back the phone and then said he had just moved back to town, and he guessed he would just walk home. As he began to walk out, he stopped at the door and turned around and looked at me for a second. Then he said something that creeped me the heck out. "Better lock this door. You don't need an unwanted guest coming in later." I smiled, and then told him I was fine, and locked the door behind him as he left. I watched as he walked over to the curb and sat down. But then after maybe 2 to 3 minutes, a white car drove up, and he stood up and got inside. I thought this was strange because he didn't get anyone to answer when he used the phone, and he didn't talk to the driver of the car. He just got in when they pulled up. I could hear the music from the car through the wall, and I looked down to the clock on the computer screen. They close at midnight, but it was already 12:30, so I assumed that they were going to stay open an extra hour tonight. I continued my paperwork and honestly forgot about Tyler. But then I looked up to see a white car drive by. The same white car that had picked him up. They drove through the parking lot again. Maybe 5 minutes later, I saw 2 young guys walk up to the dining room door beside the lobby and tried to pull it open. They then turned to the lobby and pulled on that door. I walked over and unlocked it, and then saw a better view of them. The taller one was shirtless. He had his hair pulled up into a small man bun on the top of his head, and the smaller one had a darker complexion. They walked in and asked me if they could grab some extra cups out of the dining room, which wasn't strange because guests always wanted extra forks or something from there. So I said, sure, go ahead, and they walked into the dark dining room. About 5 more minutes passed, and then I was wondering what was taking them so long. So I walked into the dining room, and they were standing in the back of the room, whispering to each other. I flipped on the light because the switch was right by the door, and asked them if they were okay. They quickly said yes, and then grabbed their cups, and walked out, and then walked into the lobby out the front door. I walked up and locked the door, and watched as they headed for the hill, where the rooms were. Then the shirtless one looked back like he was seeing if I was watching them or not. The night dragged on like normal after that. Kenny, the maintenance guy, brought his keys in to lock them up and left a couple cans of wasp spray with his extra gear by the desk. Apparently the wasps had built a nest on the corner of the building, and he had to get rid of them tomorrow. The bar finally closed, and I watched as the parking lot slowly emptied. I liked this time because once Chloe, the bartender, left, I could invite Simon over and we could watch movies and hang out the rest of the night. Chloe came into the lobby, her hair tied up into a ponytail, and she looked exhausted. "Fuck tonight, girl. I'm glad I'm off the next couple days," she said as she locked up her keys. She handed me the money to drop in the safe, and then said she was going to finish cleaning up, and she then was out of there. I quickly texted Simon. "She's about to leave, come on." He responded, "I'm already here." I looked out, and sure enough, his car was parked outside the lobby, and he smiled and waved as he opened the door. He pushed his dark-rimmed glasses up on his nose, and he tugged on the internal door, which was locked, and I ran to unlock it. "Chloe's still here, you can't be here yet." "Shit, what should I do?" "I'm not sure. I could run up to the pool and stick my legs in until she's gone?" I agreed, and he left. I watched as he walked up the hill to the pool. I finished up my paperwork and then walked to the kitchen to make some fresh coffee so I didn't fall asleep. In between snaps of Simon at the pool, I fixed myself a snack and then made another pot of coffee for later. I turned the corner out of the kitchen and into the dining room, and standing on the other side of the glass door was a man in all black clothes, and he was wearing a white painted mask in the shade of a fox. I dropped the plate of food I had because it scared me so badly. He had his hand up to the window, looking in trying to see me. I slid down the wall and backed up into the doorway of the kitchen. I tried to keep my eyes on him. I saw his black hoodie and gloves he had on, and then I saw a glint of light from his hand. A knife. I covered my mouth, thinking he could hear my breathing, even through the walls. I crawled my way to the back hallway and stood and ran to the bar. I jerked open the door and saw another man. The only difference in his costume was his mask was a white bunny. I looked to his feet where I saw Chloe in a pool of blood and a large gash on her head, her blonde hair stained red from the blood. I screamed and slammed the door shut as he jumped towards me. In the chaos, I must have dropped my phone because it wasn't in my vest pocket anymore. I quickly pulled the shelf over and it blocked the door. He couldn't get through. I ran back to the kitchen and crawled through the dark dining room into the lobby. I had left the cordless phone in the office, so if I could get to it, I could call the police, I thought. I ran into the lobby and then slammed the door to the office. I looked around but couldn't find the phone. I watched as on the cameras, a third man walked onto the screen. He was wearing the mask of a stag. He tossed the cordless phone to Bunny Boy, and he stomped it on the ground. I realized the front door must have been unlocked, because how else would they have been able to get the phone? I opened the office door a crack to look out. I quickly flung it open and ran to the front door and locked it. The stag must have saw me because he ran to the door and started jerking on it trying to get in. I flipped him off and started laughing. Then I heard glass breaking to my right. I looked to the dining room, and Foxface had tossed a rock through the glass. He stepped through, and I could hear the glass crunch under his large boots. His head snapped towards me, and then he bolted. He grabbed me and tossed me over the front desk. I slammed into the ground. It knocked the air out of me. I was stunned. I heard heavy footsteps running around the desk, and then he was over me. He began to choke me, but I was able to reach my hand up to the desk organizer. I jabbed the blue-handled scissors deep in his neck, and he froze. His grip loosened, and then he fell to the floor. I ran back to the office and slammed the door shut and locked it. I watched on the cameras as the stag and Bunny Boy ran inside and ran over to Foxface and checked on him. Bunny Boy slammed into the office door, and the stag just shook his head. He looked up to the camera and tilted his head and pulled something out of his pocket. He held it up to the camera. It was my phone, and on it was a message from Simon. The stag hit Bunny Boy and then showed him the message, and Bunny Boy ran off. I clicked to the other angle of the camera to watch as he ran up the hill to the pool. He was going after Simon. I had to do something. I had to get up there. I had to save him. After a second, I remembered something. The main breaker to the hotel was in the office. I ran to the breaker box and flipped the switch, and everything went dark. I felt my way over to the door and looked up to the camera, which was still recording in night vision, so I saw the stag looking around, confused. I opened the door and ran. I plunged the scissors into his leg and pushed him over. I unlocked the front door and ran. I could hear him screaming behind me in pain. I started running up the hill and got to the pool. I jerked open the gate and saw Bunny Boy standing on the edge of the pool, his boot pressing down on Simon's head, holding him under the water, drowning him. I grabbed the pool net and slammed it into Bunny Boy's head. This took him off guard and knocked him into the pool. I ran over to the side of the pool and pulled Simon out. He was unconscious. I started CPR, and finally he spit the water up. Thank God. But before I could celebrate, Bunny Boy jumped out of the water and grabbed me and dragged me into the pool. He started trying to slash at me, but I was able to fight him off. Then I heard a strange sound. The cover to the pool was closing. I pushed Bunny Boy off me and kicked him in the face and swam for the surface as I sprung out of the water. I saw Simon near the control box with his thumb on the button, closing the cover. I pulled myself out of the pool. Bunny Boy began swimming for the edge, and I picked up the pool net again. As he stood up, I knocked him back underwater as the cover closed. We heard muffled screams underwater until the bubbles stopped. I looked over to Simon, who was not doing great. He was holding a stab wound that I hadn't seen earlier. I grabbed a pool tool and put pressure on it. I told him to hold on, and I was going to get help. I walked back down to the lobby, my hair now dripping and smelling like chlorine. I stepped through the broken door into the lobby. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife, and then crawled my way back to the lobby. There was a button under the register that I could push in case of a robbery that would call the police. I just had to get to it. I started crawling on the floor to the desk when I was grabbed by the stag. He stabbed his knife into my leg, causing me to scream out in pain. I retaliated by swinging my knife at him, slicing him across the face, and knocking the mask off. I kicked him as he fumbled for the mask, and then turned to look at me. It was Tyler. I was stunned, frozen. I could only think of one thing to say. Why? Because you weren't polite. Pretty girls are supposed to be polite. Fuck that, I said as I reached for Kenny's wasp spray, and emptied the can into Tyler's face. He screamed until his voice was raspy. He finally passed out from the pain as the police lights danced across the lobby's ceiling. I dropped the can and stumbled my way out of the door. "Who called you guys?" I asked the officer. "I did," Simon said, as he stumbled down the hill holding his cell phone. "Now can someone please make me stop bleeding?" The cops ran over to him, as the others ran inside with their guns drawn. They arrested Tyler, and apparently Foxface and Bunny Boy had been the two guys that needed extra cups. I found out that after high school, Tyler's mom had passed away. Then a few years after that, his dad and sister had died in a car accident. He moved away and got in with the wrong crowd, and started doing meth. When he moved back, he was still using, and he and his buddies had planned to just rob the hotel that night. But when Tyler recognized me, he knew I could trace it back to him, so they couldn't leave anyone alive. The hotel gave me a long-needed vacation and a good therapist to make up for this. But even after that, I still couldn't stand working there, so I quit. And when I went to find a new job, I made it very clear, I don't work nights anymore. So, Tyler, the creepy guy from high school who tried to kill me Ghostface style at my night shift job, let's not meet again. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the content, it would help out the channel a lot if you could subscribe. I hope to see you next time. Stay spooky.